The first thing Nadia ever said to the man who would change her life was, "You're blocking my cart." She didn't mean to be rude. She just had 43 samosas going cold in a steel tray, a lunch crowd that waited for nobody, and a very tall, very pale man standing directly in front of her street cart like he had materialized there and hadn't quite decided what to do next. He was looking at her setup the way people look at things they don't understand, not rude exactly, just genuinely confused, like he'd encountered something outside his existing categories. "Sorry," she said again, less patiently. "I need to get through." He stepped aside. She squeezed past him with her tray, set it down, flipped the warmer lid, and forgot about him completely for the next 2 hours because the lunch rush at the corner of Meron Street did not care about mysterious pale men with excellent coats. His name was Kale. She didn't know that yet. What she knew, over the following week, was that he kept appearing. Not in a threatening way, not hovering, just present. He would be at the edge of the square when she was setting up at 7 in the morning. He'd be sitting on the low wall across from her cart at noon, not eating, not doing anything obviously, just sitting with the quality of someone who had nowhere to be, and found that completely acceptable. On the 5th day, she'd had enough of pretending not to notice. "Are you going to buy something, or just watch?" she called across to him. He looked at her. Even from 15 feet away, his eyes were striking dark and still and carrying something she couldn't name, like looking at deep water and understanding that the bottom is very far down. "What would you recommend?" he said. Not a question. More like someone testing whether the concept of recommendation applied to them. "The aloo tikki," she said, "but only if you actually eat it. Don't stand there holding it getting philosophical." Something happened at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. The memory of one. Maybe. He came to the cart. His name was Kyle, and he ate the aloo tikki standing at her cart like a man who hadn't eaten in a very long time and was relearning the mechanics of it, which was, though Nadia didn't know this, not entirely wrong. "Good?" she asked. "Yes," he said, which came out like it surprised him. She watched him from the corner of her eye while she served 3 other customers. He wasn't like the office workers who ate fast and scrolled their phones, or the construction guys who ordered 4 things at once and talked over each other. He just stood there and ate, and occasionally looked around at the street like he was seeing it for the first time. The rickshaws and the noise, and the auntie arguing with the vegetable seller 2 carts down, and the kid on the bicycle going way too fast through the whole chaos. "You're not from here," she said, when the rush thinned. "No, where from?" A pause that went 1 beat too long, a long way away. That's not an answer. It's the honest one. Nadia refilled the chutney container and looked at him properly for the first time. He was tall in a way that made the street feel slightly smaller. Dark hair, not long but not short, the kind of hair that looked like it had never been fussed over. His coat was expensive but worn, the kind of expensive that doesn't need to announce itself. His hands, wrapped around the paper plate, were very pale and very still. "You look like you haven't slept in a week," she said. "Longer," he said. She laughed, because she thought he was joking. He wasn't. His name was KL, and he was 940 years old, and he had not slept in the way humans sleep for longer than this city had existed in its current form. He had stood on this street, or one very much like it, before the buildings were buildings. He had watched everything come, and then go, come, and then go, in the particular rhythm that became, after enough centuries, simply the texture of existence. He had stopped being moved by things a long time ago, not deliberately. It had happened the way most things happened over very long spans of time, gradually, then completely. He had stopped smiling around the 400th year, stopped laughing somewhere around the 700th, not out of sadness exactly. More like those responses had been worn smooth, like stones in a river, until there was nothing left to catch the light. He had come to this city because he came to all cities eventually to see what remained, what had changed. What new thing humans had managed to build on top of the old thing they had knocked down? It was habit. Maybe the only one he had left. He had not expected the cart, or the girl running it. Nadia was 24 and ran the cart her father had run before his knees gave out, and she had strong opinions about chutney ratios and absolutely no patience for people who couldn't make up their minds during the lunch rush. She had a gap between her front teeth, and she talked to her regular customers the way you talk to people you've made a quiet decision to be decent to, regardless of whether they deserve it. She argued with the vegetable supplier every Tuesday, with the cheerful aggression of someone who actually enjoys negotiation. She had ink on her left hand most mornings from the notebook she kept under the cart, filling it with things she observed during the long, quiet stretches. She was ordinary in every way that the world uses that word to mean unremarkable. Kael had no idea why he couldn't stop coming back. On the 9th day, she asked him his name. "Kael," he said. "Just Kael?" "Just Kael." "Okay, just Kael," she said, handing him his tea. "You're going to tell me eventually where you're actually from. I'm very patient. I doubt that." She pointed at him with the ladle. That was almost a joke. He looked at the ladle, then at her. Almost, he agreed. The laugh happened on a Tuesday. She hadn't planned it. Nobody could have planned it. It came from the anti-situation, which escalated the way the anti-situation always did, with no warning and considerable volume. Kael was at his usual spot at the edge of the cart, drinking tea he didn't need, and watching the street in the meditative way that Nadia had begun to think of as simply his mode of existing in the world, when Auntie Parveen arrived. Auntie Parveen was 63, built like someone who had opinions about everything, and had been proved right often enough to feel permanent about it. And she wanted her samosas a specific way that she explained every single time, as if Nadia had never met her before. Not too crispy on the outside, but crispy enough. You know how I mean? "I know how you mean, Auntie. Last time it was too soft." It wasn't too soft. "I know soft. Betty, I've been eating samosas since before you were born. I've been making them since before I could reach the cart." This went on. It always went on. Nadia had developed the capacity to hold this conversation with one part of her brain while the rest of her continued functioning normally, which was a skill she had earned through approximately 400 repetitions of this exact exchange. What she had not accounted for was her cat. She had a cat, a small orange disaster, named Mirki, who was not supposed to be under the cart, but lived under the cart anyway, because Mirki made her own decisions. Mirki had, that morning, discovered the bag of dried lentils Nadia kept as emergency backup stock, and had been sitting on it for 2 hours in the specific way cats sit on things, completely confident, deeply inconvenient. At the precise moment Auntie Parveen reached the climax of her samosa brief, Mirshi emerged from under the cart, walked across the counter with total confidence, sat down directly between Nadia and Auntie Parveen, and looked at Auntie Parveen with the expression cats reserve for people they have assessed and found wanting. Auntie Parveen stopped mid-sentence. Mirshi blinked slowly. "Whose cat is this?" Auntie Parveen said. Not as a question. "She lives here," Nadia said. "On the food cart. Under it, technically, she's visiting." Auntie Parveen and Mirshi regarded each other. The entire lunch queue had gone quiet, with the specific attention of people watching something they haven't seen before. Then, Mirshi put one paw on Auntie Parveen's hand on the counter, very deliberately, the way you tap someone on the shoulder, and meowed once. Auntie Parveen's face did something complicated. "She's asking you to decide," Nadia said, completely straight-faced. "She's very busy." And that was when it happened. That was when Kael laughed. It wasn't a polite sound. It wasn't the contained, almost smile she had been cataloging for 2 weeks. It was a real laugh, sudden and unguarded. The laugh of someone who had been caught completely off guard by something delightful and had no defense ready in time. It came out of him like something escaping, and for a moment he looked not younger exactly, but unguarded in a way that changed his entire face. Nadia stared at him. He stopped. looked at his own hand on the counter like it had done something without his permission. Then he looked at her, and she was still staring, and something moved across his face that she couldn't read. "Sorry," he said, which made no sense. "Don't apologize for laughing," she said. He stopped. Started again. "I haven't done that in a while." She looked at him for a moment. Then she put Auntie Parveen's samosas in the bag, extra crispy, and slid them across the counter. "Well," she said, "you're welcome." He came back the next morning before she opened. She was setting up, unpacking the tray liners, arguing with the gas connection that stuck every third morning, when she heard footsteps and looked up, and there he was at 7:15 with 2 cups of tea from the stall down the road, holding them out like he wasn't entirely sure of the protocol. "I didn't know how you take it," he said. "Lots of sugar, no cardamom," she said. "The cardamom one is yours?" He nodded. She took hers, sipped it, went back to the gas connection. He stood to the side and watched her wrestle with it for 30 seconds, and then said, "May I?" And she moved aside, and he fixed it in about 15 seconds, with the quiet competence of someone who had fixed things for a very long time. "Thanks," she said. "It's the valve," he said. "It needs replacing." "I know, I've been saying that for a month." "Who's supposed to replace it?" "My uncle, who is very busy being unhelpful." Something flickered in his expression. "I can replace it." She looked at him. "You know how to fix street cart gas valves. I know how to fix most things," he said, which landed in the air between them with a weight she didn't fully understand yet. "I've had time to learn." That was the first morning they talked without the lunch crowd as background noise. It was different. Quieter. The street was just waking up. The light still soft. A few early vendors setting up. A dog investigating something at the corner with great seriousness. Kyle leaned against the wall beside the cart and drank his tea and asked her questions, not the getting-to-know-you questions people usually asked. Not, "What do you do? Where did you study? What are your plans?" but different ones. What did she notice first in the morning? What did she write in the notebook? What was the most interesting thing she had heard this week from a customer? She told him about the retired professor who came every Friday and always ordered 1 samosa and ate it in 4 precise bites while reading a book and never looked up. She told him about the couple who had their first date at her cart 4 years ago and came back on the anniversary every year, always ordering the same thing, and how she pretended not to remember them because she could see they liked that she did. She told him she wrote down overheard conversations, not full ones, just fragments, because fragments were more honest than whole stories. He listened the way she had never been listened to, like every word had weight, and he was not in a hurry. "Why?" she asked eventually. "Why what? Why are you asking me all this? You could be asking anybody." He was quiet for a moment. The dog at the corner had given up and was heading elsewhere. A scooter went past. Too fast. The driver waving apologies at nobody. "Because you notice things," he said. "Most people stop noticing after a while. It's not their fault. Life gets loud, but you still." He paused, and she watched him look for the word with the care of someone for whom words still meant specific things. "You still look at things like they might surprise you." Nadia held her teacup with both hands. "Is that unusual?" "More than you'd think," he said, after enough time. She looked at him sideways. "How much time are we talking about?" He smiled, then small, careful, but real. "A lot," he said. She decided not to push it. Not yet. She pushed it 2 days later. She asked him directly because she was not someone who went around things when going through them was available. It was evening. The cart was packed up, the square emptying out, that particular golden gray hour when the day can't decide whether it's finished. Kyle had stayed, which he had been doing more often, the staying after extending itself by increments that neither of them commented on. "Tell me something true," she said. He looked at her. "Something you don't usually tell people. I'll go first." She sat on the edge of the cart. "I'm scared the cart is my ceiling. That I'll be here at 50 saying one more year and never actually try the other things. A pause. Your turn. He was quiet for long enough that she thought he was going to deflect. Then, I'm older than this city. She processed that. This city is very old. Yes, how much older? Significantly, she looked at him with the same focused attention she gave complicated things. Are you going to make me guess, or are you going to tell me? I'm trying to figure out, he said, carefully, what telling you costs. Costs you, or costs me? Both, potentially, she thought about that. The street was quiet now, just a few people cutting through. Somewhere up the road, someone was playing music, something old and low and unhurried. I'm not fragile, she said, if that's what you're calculating. I know, he said. That's actually the issue. She waited. If you were fragile, he said, slowly, like he was building the thought as he spoke it, you would hear what I'm about to say and you would leave, and that would resolve things cleanly. But you're not. So you won't. And then he stopped. And then what? And then you'd matter, he said. More than is safe for either of us. The music drifted down from up the road. Nadia looked at this man who fixed gas valves and ate a Lou Ticky like it was a new invention and laughed once, unguarded, at a cat and an auntie. And she thought about what her mother always said, that the most honest things get said in the evenings, because the day stops protecting you. Tell me, she said. So he did. Not everything. Not all at once. He was not built for all at once anymore. But the shape of it, what he was, what that meant, how long he had been moving through the world like furniture nobody could quite see. He told her about the early centuries, when the world was smaller and darker, and his nature was something feared and named, and given wide berth. He told her about learning to exist alongside humans, rather than apart from them, the long, slow project of it. He told her about the things he had watched come and go. She listened without interrupting. Which was, he realized, very rare. People interrupted when they were frightened. She just sat on the edge of her cart with her hands in her lap and let him speak. When he finished, the street was dark and properly quiet. Okay, she said. He waited for the rest of it. I have questions, she said. Of course. Not tonight, though. Tonight I need to think. She got up, dusted her hands on her camise. Go home, Kale. I'll see you tomorrow. He looked at her. That's it? What did you expect? I don't know, he said honestly. Running, maybe, or lots of questions immediately. I told you I'm not fragile. She picked up her bag. Also, I'm tired and I've been on my feet since 7, and whatever conversation comes next needs me to be rested. She paused. Do you need anything? Before I go? He stared at her. What? She said. Nobody, he said slowly, has asked me that in a very long time. Nadia slung her bag over her shoulder. That's sad and we're going to fix it, she said, matter-of-factly. Good night. She walked away down the quiet street, and Kyle stood beside her folded-up cart in the dark, and felt something he hadn't felt in so long he had genuinely stopped expecting to feel it again. Like the next day was something to look forward to. She came back with questions. Of course she did. 7 of them, written in the notebook she kept under the cart, in the neat compressed handwriting she used when she wanted to think clearly. She had numbered them, which he found, for reasons he didn't immediately examine, enormously endearing. Number 1, she said, the next morning, handing him his tea before he could go get it. Does it hurt? Being what you are. No, he said. Then, more honestly, not physically. She noted something in the notebook. Number 2, the not smiling for 700 years thing. What happened? He looked at his tea. Nothing dramatic. That's the honest answer. There was no single thing. It was more like when you carry enough of everything, the weight eventually smooths out all the texture. You stop reacting, because you've seen the shape of everything already. But you laughed. Yes, she looked at him over the notebook. Because of Mirki and Auntie Parveen. Because of you, he said. They were the mechanism, You were the reason. She wrote something. He couldn't see what. Number 3. Do you get lonely? He was quiet for a moment. The square was filling up, the morning crowd starting its routine. I stopped calling it loneliness a long time ago, he said. When something is constant enough, it stops being a condition and just becomes the ground you stand on. That's a very composed way to describe something terrible, she said. I've had time to compose it. She put the pen down. It is terrible, though, right? You don't have to be composed about it with me. He looked at her. This girl, with ink on her hand, and a gap in her teeth and 7 questions in a notebook, looking at him with the specific expression of someone who is genuinely asking, not performing sympathy, not managing the conversation, just asking. Yes, he said quietly, it is terrible. She nodded once, wrote something, kept going. They got through all 7 questions by mid-morning. The last one was number 7, and she had underlined it twice, which told him something about how long she had sat with it before writing it down. Number 7. Why me? You've existed for almost 1,000 years. You've met everyone. Why stop at my cart? He looked down the road, at the ordinary busy morning street, then back at her. You told me I was blocking your cart, he said. First thing, no hesitation. That's it? You looked at me like I was a person causing a minor inconvenience, he said. Not a threat, not something strange, not someone to impress or fear or accommodate, just a person in the way of your tray. He paused. I can't tell you how long it's been since someone looked at me like that. Nadia closed the notebook. She turned to serve a customer, efficient and warm, asking about their morning in that easy way she had, and Kael stood to the side and watched the way she moved through her small domain, precise, confident, fully present, and understood, in the way you understand things that don't require logic, that he was in considerable trouble. The good kind, the kind he had stopped believing, was available to him. Her father came that afternoon. He arrived at 3 o'clock with the walking stick he'd needed for 2 years, and the expression of a man conducting an inspection he would not admit was an inspection. His name was Yusuf, and he had built the cart from nothing, and had opinions about everything connected to it, including, apparently, the tall pale man standing next to it. He looked at Kael for a long moment. Kael looked back. You're the one who fixed the gas valve, Yusuf said. Yes, Nadia said, you knew what you were doing. The valve needed replacing. It wasn't complicated. Yusuf hummed, which communicated nothing and everything simultaneously. He looked at his daughter, who was not looking at either of them and was being very busy with the chutney. He looked back at Kyle. You eat here every day? Most days. You work nearby? Not exactly. Yusuf hummed again. He ordered 2 samosas and a tea and sat on the low wall across from the cart and ate slowly, watching the square with the ease of someone who had spent years doing exactly this. When he finished, he looked at Kael one more time with the assessment of a man who had raised a daughter alone and taken the job seriously. The khat masala needs adjusting, he said to Nadia, though he was still looking at Kael. Too much amkhur. It's the same ratio I always use. Baba, adjust it, he said, and stood up and said goodbye to his daughter, and nodded at Kael once with an expression that was not approval and was not disapproval, but was something in between that said, I am watching, and I have not decided yet, and walked back up the road. Was that terrifying? Nadia said, once he was gone. A little, Kael said honestly. She smiled. Properly, the full version with the gap showing. Good, she said. That means he was paying attention. 3 weeks in, someone from Kael's world appeared. He had known it was a possibility. He had been, in the terms of his kind, visible staying in one place long enough to register, spending time with a human in a way that was outside his usual patterns. He had known, and had chosen not to care in the particular way you don't care about consequences when something feels worth the cost. The man's name was Saros. He had been alive for 600 years and moved through the world with the specific arrogance of someone who had decided, somewhere around the 300th year, that restraint was for lesser beings. He appeared at the cart on a Wednesday afternoon, with the timing of someone who had waited for a moment when Nadia was alone. She was alone. Kyle arrived at the square to find Saros at the cart counter with the posture of someone making a point, and Nadia behind it with the expression she wore when she was deciding exactly how much patience to extend to a difficult situation before she stopped extending it. "This is interesting," Saros said, not turning around when Kyle arrived. 9 centuries, and you end up at a street cart. "Move away from the cart," Kyle said. "She's lovely," Saros said, still not turning. "Very ordinary. I can see the appeal. A change of texture. Saros, don't worry." He finally turned. His smile was the kind that never reached anything. "I'm not here to make a scene. I'm here to deliver a message from the others. They're concerned. You've been visible. You've been," he glanced at Nadia with a brief and entirely dismissive assessment, attached, "That's not their business. You know they'll make it their business if you don't correct it." Saros looked at Nadia again, differently this time, the way you look at something you're calculating the value of. "It would be a shame if finish that sentence," Kyle said, very quietly, "and we'll have a different conversation." The quiet of it was more effective than volume would have been. Saros recalibrated. He had known Kyle a long time, long enough to know the difference between warning and threat, and which version he was currently hearing. "Think about what you're doing," Saros said, his tone shifting to something that tried for reasonable. "This doesn't end well. It never ends well. You know that. You've lived it." He left. The square went back to its normal noise. Nadia was very still behind the counter. "Are you okay?" Kyle said. "Yes." A pause. "Who was that?" "Someone from my world. The old part of it." She was quiet, setting things back to rights on the counter, moving efficiently the way she did when she was thinking hard. "He said this doesn't end well." "Yes, what does he mean by that?" Kale looked at his hands. "I've had people I cared about before, across the centuries. Humans." A pause. "It ends. That's what he means. They age. I don't. It ends and I continue, and the weight of it," he stopped. "Accumulates," she said. "Yes." She finished straightening the counter, looked up at him. "He's assuming I'm asking for forever," she said. He looked at her. "I'm 24, she said. "I'm not planning next year's menu, let alone eternity. I'm just," she paused, looking for the right word the way she did. "Here, right now, in this conversation." She held his gaze. "Is that not enough to start with?" He didn't answer immediately. He looked at her standing in the afternoon light behind her cart, straightforward and unfrightened, and felt that particular feeling again, the one he hadn't expected, the one that felt like a window opening in a room that had been shut a very long time. "Yes," he said. "That's enough. Good." She picked up a ladle. "Now are you going to stand there, or are you going to be useful? I need someone to chop the coriander." He had not chopped coriander in several centuries. He did it badly. She corrected his technique twice, patiently but without managing him, and the afternoon moved around them ordinary and warm, and Saros and his message, and the weight of what was complicated, receded to where complicated things go, when you are present enough not to let them take the whole room. He met her mother on a Thursday. He hadn't expected to. He arrived at the cart at his usual time, and found a woman he immediately understood was Nadia's mother standing behind the counter instead, with the expression of someone who had been fully briefed and had formed opinions in advance. Her name was Saba. She was 51, and had the quality of someone who had worked hard for a long time, and been proved right about most things, and saw no reason to pretend otherwise. She looked at Kale with the clear, assessing gaze of a woman who has one daughter, and takes that seriously. "You're the one," she said. "That depends on the context," he said. Something shifted in her expression. Not warmth exactly, more like the beginning of a reassessment. "Sit down," she said, gesturing at the stool Nadia kept behind the counter for slow mornings. "I'll make you tea." He sat. She made tea with the efficiency of someone who had made tea 10,000 times, which she had. She handed him a cup and poured her own, and sat across the counter and looked at him directly. "How old are you?" she said. He considered. "Older than you," Nadia said significantly. "That's accurate." Saba drank her tea. "My husband died when Nadia was 16, she said. "I raised her alone for 8 years. She paused. "She is the best thing I've done." "You understand that?" "Yes," he said. "She thinks she's not fragile, which is true, but it doesn't mean she can't be hurt." "I know." "Do you?" She set down her cup. "Because in my experience, people who have been alone a long time sometimes forget that other people feel things in real time. Not historically. Right now, while it's happening." He held that. "That's a fair concern." "It's not a concern," she said. "It's a condition." She looked at him steadily. "I'm not asking you to promise me things you can't promise. I'm not naive. I'm asking you to understand that she feels things now while they're happening, and that matters." "I understand," he said. "Good." She stood up and straightened her dupatta with the efficient motion of someone done with the formal part of a conversation. "She'll be back at 10. She went to get the morning supplies. A pause. "You fixed the gas valve. It needed replacing. Her uncle was supposed to do that for 6 weeks." "I know. She told me." Saba looked at him for a moment with an expression that moved, very slightly, into something warmer. "She also told me you laughed," she said. She seemed very pleased about that. He didn't know what to say to that. She smiled, briefly the gap-toothed smile he recognized from her daughter. "Don't look so alarmed," she said. "It was a good thing to tell me." Nadia arrived at 10:05 with the supplies, and found her mother and Kyle drinking second cups of tea in what appeared to be comfortable silence, which she assessed immediately with the attention of someone who had been monitoring both parties' baseline dispositions for a long time. "You survived," she said to Kyle. "Your mother is direct," he said. "Yes." She started unloading the supplies. "That's where I get it." "I know," he said. "I assumed." Her mother stood up, kissed Nadia's head, looked at Kyle once more with the expression that was not yet warm, but was no longer evaluating, and left. Nadia watched her go and then turned back to her cart and started setting up, and Kyle came around to the side and helped without being asked. And neither of them said anything about the conversation he'd had, but something had shifted in the air between them, and they both knew it, and neither felt the need to name it. Some things, he had learned over a very long life, are better received quietly. This was one of them. The moment he almost lost her came on a Friday evening, and it was entirely his fault. Saros had not come back himself. Instead, he had sent something worse, a rumor, planted in the right ears, that Kyle had broken certain agreements by making himself visible. The agreements were old, and Kyle had honored them for centuries, but they had rules about sustained human attachment, and Saros understood exactly which rules to invoke, and who to invoke them to. 3 of the old ones came on a Friday at dusk. Kyle saw them arrive at the edge of the square, and understood immediately what it was, and his first instinct, the instinct of 9 centuries of managing his own affairs efficiently and alone, was to go meet them, away from the cart. Away from Nadia. He went. He handled it, in the way he had learned to handle things, standing his ground on the agreements, with the calm authority of someone who had been around longer than most of them and had earned, through that, the right to be listened to. It took an hour and a half. They left without resolution but without escalation, which was the best outcome available. He came back to the square, and Nadia was packing up the cart alone, and when she saw his face she said what happened before he could say anything. He told her. He had made the decision somewhere in the last hour that he was done managing information around her, done making decisions about what she could handle, done, as her mother had said, being historical about things while she was experiencing them in real time. She listened. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You went without telling me," she said. "Yes, so I spent an hour watching you talk to 3 strangers at the edge of the square, not knowing what was happening." He registered the specific weight of that. "Yes, that was," she paused, and he could see her choosing between several versions of what she wanted to say, and selecting the accurate one. That was not okay, Kyle. I know. I'm not asking to fight your battles. I'm asking to know what's happening. She looked at him steadily. You've been alone for so long that you've confused protecting someone with managing them. Those aren't the same. He absorbed that. It landed somewhere deep, in the specific way true things land when they find something that's been waiting for them. Yes, he said. You're right. Is it resolved? Temporarily. What does temporarily mean? It means I need to address something I have been avoiding for a long time, he said. The agreements that Saros invoked. There are those who enforce them who need to formally understand that he paused. My situation has changed. And that I intend to stand by that change. Can you do that? Yes. It requires appearing before a council of old ones and making the case formally. He looked at her. It's not dangerous. It's procedural. I've simply avoided it because it requires acknowledging that I care about something, which makes me visible, in ways I have spent centuries avoiding. Nadia finished folding the cart cover. She looked at him with that direct expression he had come to understand meant she was being careful about what she said, because it mattered. Are you asking me if you should do it? She said. No, he said. I'm telling you that I'm going to. Something shifted in her face. Small, but real. Good, she said. That's the right answer. I know, he said. I practiced it on the way back. She looked at him for a moment. Then she laughed short, surprised, genuine. Was that a joke? Almost, he said, and the corner of his mouth moved in the way she had learned to read, and she shook her head and picked up her bag and bumped her shoulder against his arm as she passed him, a small, deliberate contact that said more than it appeared to. Come for dinner, she said. My mother will feed you. She barely approves of me. She made you second tea. That's practically a declaration. The council was in an old part of the city where the streets were narrow and the buildings remembered different centuries. Kyle had been there before, many times, across many versions of itself. The building they used looked ordinary from the outside and was not ordinary inside, in the way of things that have held important conversations long enough to absorb something of their weight. He went alone. He had been clear with Nadia that this was his to do, and she had been clear that she understood the difference between accompanying someone and undermining them. She had sent him off with tea in a flask, and one practical instruction: say what you actually mean, not the composed version which was the most useful advice he had received in several decades. There were 5 of them at the council table. Old ones, all of them, with the particular quality of people who have been deciding things for a long time and have arranged their faces accordingly. He knew most of them. The oldest one, a woman named Mira, who had been alive since the Byzantine era, he had known the longest. She looked at him across the table with the expression of someone who has been waiting for this conversation and had opinions already formed about how it should go. You've been visible, she said, which was both the charge and the opening. Yes, he said. The agreements were written for different circumstances, he said. I'm not arguing against their intent. I'm asking for a formal amendment, a recognition that sustained human connection, managed responsibly, is not the threat the original agreements were written to prevent. The original agreements, said one of the others, were written because of what happens when our kind becomes invested. Errors of judgment. Exposure. Harm. I know the history, Kyle said. I was there for some of it. He looked around the table. I am 940 years old. I have honored every agreement this council has ever issued. I have spent centuries being exactly what was required, careful, invisible, uninvested. He stopped. I am telling you that I am no longer willing to make that the whole of my existence. I am telling you that I have found something worth amending the agreements for, and I am asking this council to recognize that formally, as is my right, rather than forcing a conflict that serves no one. The council was quiet. Mira looked at him for a long time. He had known her across centuries and understood her silences well enough to know this one was not hostile. It was considering. Tell me about her, Mira said. He had not expected that. He showed it, which he also hadn't expected. Tell me, Mira said again. Not unkindly. I'm not asking for a file. I'm asking you to tell me. So he did. He told them about the cart and the blocked tray and the 7 questions in the notebook and the laugh that had come out of him without permission. He told them about Mirki and Auntie Parveen. He told them about what it felt like to have someone ask if he needed anything before she left for the night, and what it had done to him to realize how long it had been since anyone had. He did not compose it. He said what he actually meant. When he finished, the council table was quiet for a different reason. 940 years, Mira said, thoughtfully, and a street vendor's daughter with a cat. Yes, he said. The agreements will require conditions, said another council member. Regular reporting. Visibility management. I'll accept reasonable conditions, Kyle said. I'll accept unreasonable ones if I have to. That's where I am. Something moved across Mira's expression. He thought for a moment that it was almost warmth. I know where you are, she said. I've been there. A long time ago. A pause. The amendment will be considered. In the meantime, she looked at him steadily. Don't do anything stupid. That's not a formal condition, said the council member next to her. It's implied, Mira said. She looked at KL. Go back to your girl. He went. He found Nadia at the cart, even though it was past closing, sitting on the low wall across from it with the notebook open in her lap. She looked up when she heard him, and immediately read his face with the attention she gave things she was paying close attention to. It's okay, he said, before she could ask. She let out a breath. Sit down, she said. I have tea. She had a flask too separate from the one she'd sent with him, he realized, which meant she had come back after closing and brought tea and waited. He sat beside her on the low wall, and she poured from her flask into the lid cup and handed it to him, and they sat in the quiet street with the city going about its evening around them. What happened? She said. He told her, including the part where Mira had asked him to talk about her, and what he'd said, and that he'd said it the way she had told him to what he actually meant, not the composed version. He saw her face do something careful when he got to that part. What did you say? She asked. Specifically, he told her about the 7 questions, and the blocked cart, and the laugh. He told her what he had said about being asked if he needed anything before she left. She looked down at the notebook in her lap. When she looked back up, her expression was the one she wore when something had landed somewhere real in her, and she was deciding how much of that to show. She showed enough. You know, she said. I wrote about you. In here. She held up the notebook. That first week, when you just kept turning up and I didn't know what you were yet, what did you write? She opened it to a page near the front. There's a man who keeps appearing. Not in a strange way, in a present way, like he's actually here when most people are only approximately here. I don't know what to do with that yet. He read it. Read it again. Approximately here, he said. Most people are, she said. You've been more here in 6 weeks than anyone I've known in years. She closed the notebook. I don't know what that means for the long term. I told you I'm not planning forever. But right now, in this conversation, she looked at him. I'm very glad you fixed the gas valve. He looked at her in the streetlight, this ordinary girl who had noticed him clearly and written it down, who asked 7 questions and numbered them, who sent him off with tea and practical advice, and sat on a wall waiting with her own flask. Nadia, he said. Yes, I would like to. He stopped. Started again. I'm not good at this. I've had a lot of time to get used to not doing it. I know, she said. Say it anyway. I would like to keep coming back to the cart, he said. Not just in the morning, in the way that means something. The way your mother was checking for when she made me second tea. Nadia looked at him for a moment. That's actually very clear, she said. For someone who said they weren't good at this. I practiced that one too. She laughed, the real one, full version, gap showing. He felt it the way he felt it every time, like something moving that had been still, like warmth finding its way into something that had been cold for a very long time. "Yes," she said. "Come back. In the way that means something." He nodded once. She leaned over and poured more tea into his cup, without asking if he wanted more. Because she had already figured out he always wanted more, but wouldn't ask. And the small domesticity of it, knowing something about a person and acting on it without ceremony, moved through him in a way that didn't have a word in any language he spoke. Or maybe it did. Maybe it was just a word he hadn't used in so long he'd forgotten he had it. They stayed on the wall until the street was fully dark and quiet. She told him about the retired professor who had lingered longer than usual that day. He told her something about the city from 400 years ago that made her lean forward and ask 3 follow-up questions immediately. Mirshi appeared from somewhere, decided Kale was acceptable, and settled on his feet. He looked down at the cat, then at Nadia, watching him with that particular attention. "Don't," he said. "I wasn't going to say anything," she said, completely failing to suppress the smile. He looked back at the cat. "She picked the coldest available surface," he said. "She's practical," Nadia said. "She likes useful things." He didn't respond to that. He didn't need to. She already knew. Spring arrived in pieces, the way it does in old cities, a warm day that disappears back into cold, then a week of rain, then one morning when you step outside, and something in the air has changed for good, and you know winter is done. Nadia noticed it first, the way she noticed most things before other people did. She said it's today one morning, while setting up the cart, with the certainty of someone reading a sign, and Kale looked at the sky, and felt the change in the air, and understood she was right. He had lived through 1100 springs. He did not say this. He had learned, over the months, which things to keep to scale, and which to simply experience. The cart had regulars now, who had, without quite meaning to, incorporated Kyle into the geography of the space. The retired professor, who had once stared at him for 30 seconds, and then said you have the eyes of someone who reads in multiple languages without further comment, now occasionally addressed remarks to him about current events. Auntie Parvain had not forgiven Mirki for the incident, but had extended a grudging acceptance of Kyle's presence that expressed itself as including him in her complaints, which was, Nadia had explained, a significant form of acceptance. Her father came on Saturdays. He and Kyle had settled into a specific rhythm, minimal speech, occasional practical exchange, a quality of mutual respect that had not needed to be negotiated explicitly. Yusuf had fixed things for years with the tools of someone who understood materials and force and patience, and he recognized those qualities in other forms. He did not ask Kyle questions he didn't need answers to. Kyle did not offer things he hadn't been asked for. They both understood what mattered. One Saturday Yusuf said, without preamble, the cart needs new wheels on the left side. "I noticed," Kyle said. "I can get them by Tuesday. I can fit them Wednesday if you leave them." Yusuf nodded once and ordered 2 samosas, and that was that. Nadia, who had been monitoring this exchange from 3 feet away, said nothing, and went back to the chutney with an expression that she was not quite successfully keeping neutral. The notebook had filled up. She had started a second one. He knew, because he had seen it under the counter, knew, with the first few pages already dense with her small, neat handwriting. She had not offered to show him what was in it, and he had not asked. He respected the private work of someone paying attention to their own life. She showed him 1 page. Later, voluntarily, a list of things she had not expected. Number 7 on the list was laughing at something he says, and watching him not know what to do with that. It was still the best thing. The council amendment had come through in the 6th week. Reasonable conditions, as Mira had promised, with the particular dignity of old institutions, finding a way to accommodate what was inevitable without losing face entirely. Saros had gone quiet, which Kyle understood was temporary, and did not concern him in the way it once might have. He was done arranging his life around temporary problems. What he was arranging it around instead was simpler. Morning tea, brought from the stall down the road because he had learned her order precisely. The walk to the cart that had become, without his noticing the transition, the organizing point of his days. The conversations that happened across the counter during the slow afternoon stretches, which had the quality of two people genuinely interested in how the other thinks. The evenings that extended themselves naturally, neither of them hurrying them along or artificially prolonging them, just letting them be what they were. One evening she asked him what the city had been like before the current buildings. He told her. He drew the old street layout with his finger on the wooden counter surface, narrating the changes layer by layer. The way you read rock strata, this was when this came down. This was what replaced it. This was what people called this corner when it was different. She listened with full attention, asking questions that showed she was actually following, occasionally cross-referencing with something she'd read. "You're a history that nobody has written down," she said when he finished. He looked at her. "All of that," she said, gesturing at the counter, "is in your head." First person. Unmediated, she tilted her head slightly. "That's extraordinary, Kael. You understand that." "I've stopped being able to see it clearly," he said. "It's just accumulated. That's because you've been carrying it alone," she said. "When you share it, it becomes extraordinary again." She tapped the notebook on the counter. "I want to write it down. If you'd let me. Not everything, just the things you're willing to say out loud." He looked at the notebook, then at her. "Why? Because it should exist somewhere outside just you," she said, simply. "Things that happen to only one person and die with them," or she paused. "That's not how things should work. The best things should survive." He thought about Mira. What survives is not power or intelligence. He thought about what he had told the council, and what it had felt like to say it without composing it first. He thought about a small orange cat sitting on his feet in a cold street, and a girl who thought that was worth writing down. "Yes," he said. "All right." She opened the notebook to a fresh page. At the top she wrote his name, and then the city's name, and then a date that was not his beginning, just a beginning, and looked up at him, with the pen ready. "Start wherever you want," she said. He started with winter. The first one he remembered, which was not technically the first one he had lived through, but was the first one he had understood the weight of. He described the cold in the way you describe something you have not talked about in centuries carefully, at first, and then, less carefully, and then with the ease of someone who has remembered that language is for this, that telling is not weakness, that sharing a thing does not diminish it. She wrote it all down. The city moved outside the cart, ordinary and alive, full of people who didn't know that at a small street cart in the evening, a girl with ink on her hand was writing down things that had never been written, and a man who had stopped feeling things was discovering, incrementally, that he had not stopped, he had only stopped being somewhere worth feeling them. Mirshi walked across the counter and sat on the notebook. "She does that," Nadia said, without looking up. "Yes," Kael said. "I've noticed." He reached over and moved the cat, gently, to the side. Mirchi accepted this with the specific resignation of someone who has decided that certain people have earned the right to inconvenience her. Nadia kept writing. The spring evening settled around them, warm and ordinary and entirely sufficient. He did not need it to be more than this. He had spent centuries looking for more than this. He had not understood, until a girl told him he was blocking her cart, that this, exactly this was the thing. She looked up from the notebook, found him looking at her, said nothing, because she had learned that his silences were not empty. He said nothing, because some things are better received quietly. The evening held them both. That was enough. That, after everything, was the whole of it.